Hi everyone, so I'm just making this video to show how you can build a simple experiment with Uxf. So what I have here is just a simple scene I've made in Unity. It's just a simple task that displays two numbers to the person and you have to type in the result. It checks if the result is correct, and if it is correct, it presents some feedback, some particles, and if it's not, it just says incorrect. We want to be able to turn this into an experiment where we can log all of their responses and kind of set up the structure of the task, sequence of trials and that kind of thing. So I'll just show what this looks like so far. So if we run this, we're going to see the two numbers display and we have to type in the result. So here it's just going to wait for us to type in the number 7, we press enter, we get correct. And that's all we've got. They turn back, but it doesn't actually start the next one right now. I'll just show you what it looks like. If you type in the wrong answer, you just get incorrect. So the way this is set up, you can see the scene over here. You've just got two of these cards, and those are here. And the input box is actually a user interface element rather than a model in the scene. So you've got this input field here that we can type into, and we just got some background stuff, some stars. There's the particles, and then here I've just got an empty game object which contains a script that I've wrote, and this script is what kind of controls all the mechanics of them flipping around, making the sounds of each one, waiting for the response, and presenting the feedback. So we'll just open the script. See, I've called it adding task here. So it's just got references to all of the components that we need. And when we run our task, it just obviously this start function is a Unity function that runs on when the game starts, and it starts this coroutine, which is this method here. So if you don't know about coroutines, it's just a special type of method that can run over a period of time rather than just running all at once. So what that means is, in this case, it's going to run this bit of code that flips over the first card, then it waits for half a second, flips over the next card, waits for another half a second, then here it automatically puts our cursor on the response box, so we don't have to click it, we can just type, and then it waits again. It waits until we press the return key on our keyboard, or until we when we press the return key and the text is not empty. So if we press empty and if we press return and the box is empty, it will just continue waiting until that condition is met. Then we take the response, that is the number that they've typed in, and convert that to a number, of course, so we can check the result. So converting it to an integer here. Check if it's correct, and then display some feedback based on that. Then we wait some more time and flip them back. So I'll just run this again just to remind you what that looks like. So you can see that was the two flipping over here. We've got the flip animation, which is set up as a Unity animator here, an animation within this animator component. We put a number on that, which is these numbers that get passed to this method here. And right now, we're in this part here. It's waiting for us to press enter. And if we type in a number here, we get the feedback, which is presented here, based on if it's correct or not. Okay, so there's a few things Uxf can do for us to help make this into experiment. Of course, we want to be able to log the response. What number did people type in? How fast did they type that in? That kind of thing. So to do that, we're just going to go to the Uxf page here, the GitHub page. Of course, there's a wiki here that can describe how to use Uxf and lots of help articles on there. But to download the package, we can go over here to the releases. This is the latest one right now. We can just click and download like this. Now we've got this package. Once it's finished, we can just drag it into our project. It's going to import. We're just going to import all of these scripts that are contained in Uxf. So let's first go to Uxf Examples here, just to show what kind of thing we might want to do. So we can go maybe to this one. And if we play this, in this experiment, it's going to give us a user interface where we can select one of several experiment profiles, which provide some kind of settings for our experiment, which you can customize. So that might be things like the number of trials, or some kind of timing parameters, or anything like that. In our case, it could be the number of trials, or it could be what kind of numbers are we displaying to people? Are they single-digit numbers, double-digit numbers, that kind of thing? And we could even have multiple profiles which provide each of those settings. So when we start our experiment, we can actually select one of several settings profiles. Then we also, in this case, are saving data locally to the disk. So of course we can, with version 2 of Uxf, we can also upload data to an online database or other means of storage, but for this experiment, we're just going to save the data locally to the disk, and this is why we've got this checkbox here, this input field here, which allows us to browse for a location. So if I press this, it's going to ask us to browse for a location. Let's just go to desktop here and make a new folder, Uxf test data, and we'll use this to store our data, and we'll select that folder. Participant ID, so of course every participant, we want them to have a unique ID. We can type one in that we've decided on, or we can just press this to make a random one. And these are some parameters that we could also add our own parameters here that we want to kind of collect. So this could be, age or gender of the participant. You might want to collect those things, so you can actually add those here really easily. And then you've got some instructions that you can read for the experiment, and a tick box just to ensure the researcher or participant who is taking part has read this. So if we tick this and begin, in this experiment we're just reaching towards the circle that is highlighted. So we first go here, let me go like that. So Uxf is in the background calculating or collecting all of the data, which target we moved to, how fast we did it. It's even tracking our mouse cursor and saving all that to a set of CSV files. So right now we're going through the experiment, and I think that's enough, but we can end it here and it's still going to save the data. So we'll go to that folder that we created. You see within this folder here, we have move to target. That's the name of the experiment. And we have the participant name. So this means session number 1. You can have participants, take part in multiple sessions if it's the same person. And we have a bunch of data that's collected. So this is the main results file that will just tell us some kind of behavioral data. What's the trial number, when was it started, when did it end? There's some parameters here on the timing. Did we move to the correct, where was the correct target? Was it on the left or the right? Did I move to the right one? And we also have some paths here which tell us where the data is stored for the cursor movement. Okay, so let's then look at how we can integrate this into our experiment. So if we go back to our scene, which is in here, adding task, first thing we need to do is get this prefab, this Uxf prefab. So if we go to Uxf and prefabs, we've got this Uxf rig prefab here. If we drag this over, automatically going to add in all of the Uxf functionality. So this is the user interface, and if we click on this, we get this inspector over here, which allows us to customize all of the functionality. So first, maybe let's configure the UI. So if we click on the configure here and scroll down, that's how we configure the UI. So we can actually configure not to have a UI at all. We configure how we get the participant ID, all this kind of stuff. These are the data points I was talking about. So you could let's maybe ask for the participant's age. So we can say age as the name that it displays here. The internal name, we could call that age years. That's the name that we'll use when storing the data. And the data type, so we're just going to say integer. And we say generate, and we see we've got this box here. We can also have some instructions that are displayed as well. So we can actually customize these text components or add more so that we've got a bunch of instructions. You can even have images here to display to the participant. Okay, so the core of how we can use Uxf is to look at this inspector here, and we can actually get Uxf to call certain methods at certain times. For example, when we say the trial starts, when the trial ends, that kind of thing. And that will help generate the kind of structure of the experiment. So first thing we want to do is we want to generate a bunch of trials with each of their settings. So let's make a new script. So let's say generate experiment. So in the script, all we want to do is, we don't need these, we're just going to create a new method, public void, meaning it's not returning any values, it's just something that, just a method that runs, just runs and does something, and we'll call that generate, because what it's going to do is generate our experiment. And we actually want to take this session, Uxf session component as the parameter. So first we want to add the namespace, which means we can access all of our Uxf code from our own scripts. And we're going to say session, and we'll call that Uxf session. So, and then now we've got access to this session, we can use that to generate a bunch of trials, or access any of the other functionality of Uxf. So with the session, we can actually say create block. So in Uxf, we have trials which are grouped by block. So you might have multiple blocks. One block might be like a practice block or a main block or whatever it is. And we can the number we type in here is how many trials. So let's say we want 5 trials to start with, and we can actually get the reference for the block here. So block my block equals this create block, like that. And we want to, within that block, we want to generate on each trial what are the 2 numbers that we're going to present to the user. So we can loop over the trials within the block and say trial. So this is the type trial, and this is the name of the parameter within the loop for each trial in my block dot trials. So within the block, there's a trials object which we can loop over, and we can say trial dot settings. So settings are kind of like our independent variables, things that we can decide upon, and we'll say set value. So we want to set the value of, let's call this number 1, and for now we can just say let's set that to number 2, and then the same for number 2. Let's set this to 4. So this is the card on the left, this can be the card on the right, and we're setting them to 2 and 4. So right now for each trial it's going to be the exact same numbers. And that's basically it. So this is now going to generate this block of 5 trials, and it's going to have these numbers. We could also do some cool stuff like first trial and set the settings set value. So we could actually set the first value to be easier or something like that if we wanted. Equally, we could do last trial. Equally, we could do get trial. Get trial. So this could be trial number 3, and we set the value for that specific one. In this case, we're just going to loop over all of them. So we've got this method. Now we need a means of calling this method. So in Unity, we can go here in our events, and you can read here about when each of these events are called, but Uxf calls these events for us, and we can just assign the methods that we want to use at these stages. So when this session begins, what we need to do is generate all of our trials, right? So we're going to pull in this reference from our adding task and select the generate experiment script we created, and find the and this is okay. Find the generate. Maybe I didn't save that. There we go. Okay, so you need to save this script to make it display. Okay. So generate experiment, and then this is the generate method that we've created. It's dynamic here because it means it's actually going to pass this reference to the script, meaning this component. Anyway, so that's what's going to happen at the start. And then when the trial begins, we want to actually go back to our adding task script. Remember, this is attached here. This one wants to basically run through this trial sequence here, this big sequence that we've created. So instead of it running on start, we're just going to say change this to public so we can find it from the outside. Public, and run adding task trial. And again, we want the reference, but this time because it's running when the trial begins rather than the session begins, we want the trial. So add the Uxf namespace there, and this particular method, you can see here it's a brackets trial, so it's going to pass the trial as the parameter. So we say trial. So a parameter called trial of type trial. Okay, and these numbers here, we're not going to pass the number, we're actually just going to pass this trial through as well. We can't directly start this coroutine from the event, so we have to just create this kind of wrapper function here. So we'll pass the trial in like that. So right now what we're doing is we've created this method that we're going to run when the trial begins, and it's going to start this coroutine that's called adding task sequence, and it's passing the trial over as an argument. So remember before we hard coded 3 and 4 as the values. So we want to pull those from the trial because we might have different numbers on each trial. So let's say int num1 equals trial, and then we want to get that setting that we set before. Get int, because it was an integer, this here, and we want number 1. It needs to be a string, and we want number 2. So now you see when this puts the number on the card, it's actually just going to take this number here from the trial. So I think we can actually run this in a second. So we need to still add this event here, this adding task, and adding task script, and the run adding task trial method that we just created. So it's going to run this, then start the coroutine, which goes through all this thing. Okay, one more thing we need to do is when the session begins, we need to actually start the first trial, because right now it's just going to begin the session. It's generated all these trials, but it's not actually going to start one. So we can actually use the session itself here, like this, drag this component down. We can actually say begin next trial. Okay. So one thing is we don't have this session settings profile as well. So right now what we'll do is configure this and say settings mode, and we'll just have empty settings, which means we don't have this JSON file that we can read from a file to generate a bunch of settings, just for simplicity here. So it's automatically filled in the directory from last time, and we can generate a participant ID. We can type in an age. I'll just show you what it looks like if you don't type in an age. It's going to flash. So we can just, type in some numbers here and begin. See, it's just presented with the trial. Hopefully the logic works, and it works out that the correct answer is 6. That's cool. That's all it does right now. We need to make it start the next trial as well. So what we need to do here is, you see, we've passed this trial, we've got the numbers, but at the bottom, after the 3-second wait, we can actually end the trial. Okay. That's not going to do anything of interest right now, but what it does mean is we can add something here that happens on trial end. So what we can do is maybe start the next one. So we pull the session down again. We want to access the functionality of the session. So we can say begin next trial safe, and the safe here means that if there isn't a next trial, it's just going to do nothing. That is useful because obviously when we get to the final trial, when that finishes, it's going to try and run the next one. There's not going to be one. We're going to get an error. But if we have the safe function, begin next trial safe, it's just going to do nothing. So hopefully we made 5 trials. So let's see if it runs through all of those. So let's just run through these. You see. Looks like that animation didn't pick up there. So maybe we need to have a delay. Need another delay. So these two flip back, but there was no delay before the next one began. So let's add a, maybe a 2-second delay. So these should turn back. Okay, perfect. And you can actually see here, it's actually giving us a live view of the experiment. So it looks like that's working. One thing we can also do is we probably want to have a record of what these numbers were. These two numbers, number 1 and number 2. So we can actually go in here and say what settings do we need to log to our output. And we'll say number 1 and number 2. These are the names of the settings. And perhaps we can also, right now, change these numbers from being constant to just a random number. So in Unity we have the random class, which we can do a random.range. And if we give it to numbers, to integers, it will give us a random number between those two. So let's say between 1 and 10. It's exclusive here, so it's actually going to be between 1 and 9. There we go. So we've now, each number is random. So we can run this. We can fill this out. 1 and 6, 7. 9. Let's get 1 intentionally wrong here. Let's see if that's still working. It's good. 13. And that's it because of that's the last trial. So we could have some, some feedback at the end saying it's over or something like that. So let's see what the output looks like. So we're not actually collecting any data right now. It's actually still called my experiment. Maybe we can change that right now. So you see here, this is if you are using empty settings. You're gonna have to type in experiment here. So let's say adding task. So let's see the most recent one and the results. You can see here it's helpfully given this summary table and given us the numbers that we presented and all of the timings and things like that. So we also want to collect what they typed in, so let's do that now. So that's quite easy. Once we have access to this trial right now, so we can do something like see this response. This is the number that we typed in. We can actually log this within the trial. So we can say trial dot result, and then we use these square brackets. This is kind of like a dictionary. So we can say response and then equals this number. that we typed in. Okay. We also want to know if they got the answer correct or not, so we can log that as well. Correct equals correct, like that. Okay, so this is going to log these two, and we'll see these in the output. And if we're in a script where we don't have access to this trial like this, like conveniently, so we might be in another script, we can go do something like this. We can say session. Well, there's two ways. We can reference the session as a public variable, like this. Something like that. And we can assign that in the inspector. So you see here now we've got this need to save that again. Okay, so now we've got that, and we can just drag over the rig over there, and now we've got access to the session from any script. So we can say session dot current trial, and then dot result, and then you can assign your result from there. You can also do current trial dot end if you want to end the trial from another script. Another way that's even easier is just to say session dot instance, which means this is using a singleton design pattern, which you can read about online, but basically it means you type in the type session dot instance, which gets you from any script, gets you the current instance of the session, and you can then go, current trial result, that kind of thing, and actually fill out your result here. Equals 1, 2, 3. Something like that from any script. But here we have access to the trial because it's set up in this coroutine way, which can lead to cleaner code. So let's see how that goes. I think I'm going to actually reduce some of these timers because they take quite a while. Okay, so that's everything. So let's see in the output now. Remember we renamed it to adding task. Here's our participant on session 1. So we can go and see the result. You see we added this response and the correct column. So now really nice, we have these numbers all ready for us, just like that. So that's kind of the core functionality that you would need. I'll just show you a couple more things. So one thing you might want to do is track the position of the cursor, or track the position of any kind of object within Unity. So in this case we might want to track the position of the cursor, so let's go make a new game object here. We can call it cursor. So we have this new cursor, mouse tracker. So what this does is we can track the mouse position in pixels or within the world. So in this experiment it doesn't make much sense to track the mouse, but here you go, I'll just show you what it looks like. So now we've added the script to an empty game object. We can just reference this in here. There we go. there's just one trial. And now, like magic, we should have in this trackers folder, we're going to have a CSV file which tells us the pixels of our mouse over time. So that's kind of that's most of what you would need to get started. Or maybe I'll just walk through some of the other features. These kind of settings you can read about online. They're not so useful. We've talked about this. This is where you would log a certain setting. If you want a certain independent variable to be listed on each trial, and you want that as an output, you can list those here. This is not really needed so much anymore. It can be used just to type in for good practice the parameters that you want to measure. So we have correct and what was it? Correct and response. So the only reason this is here now, it does work without them, but is if you had an experiment where this wasn't listed, this didn't get collected, these would be these columns wouldn't exist, and that could be a problem for your data analysis. So they are there. Here, the data handling. So this is something new, and it can be used to define how your data is output. So right now we're just using file saver, which means the data just gets stored to files, which is fine if you're doing this kind of experiment. But of course, if you want to run this in a web browser, you might want to use this one, which can run which can collect the data and upload it to a database. So you have to go to configure here to see how to set it up. This download or copy one is also quite cool. It's used that at the end of the session, it's going to pop up with a list of files, and you can actually copy or download each of those. That's good for like web browser experiments, particularly if you're running like a classroom full of people and they want to be able to access their own data. It's like a low-tech way of doing distributed data collection. And maybe in the UI, we have a bunch of other settings. We could speed this up by saying let's do automatic start. We don't need any user interface at all. And let's say the participant ID, let's generate the unique ID each time. And settings are empty. And the problem here is the file. Remember, we needed to enter the path of the folder we wanted to store the data in. So of course we need some way of defining that. We can actually change that by going to configure here and change this file saver component to say fixed, and it's just going to store it in a path that we enter. So let's just type in this path. Obviously you need to be careful on different PCs, you're going to have a different path here. Okay, so maybe what the final thing we can do is make it end properly, because right now it doesn't end. So maybe what we can do is check if it's the final trial, and then end if that is the case. So we could write another script, maybe. So we do have this application handler, which is supplied with Uxf, which allows us to do, quit the application quite easily in both the editor and when you build the application. So when we end the session, this is after we've ended the session, we might want to stop the game. We can do that by pulling this over, getting this application handler that's built into Uxf and say quit. But we need some way of actually ending it. So what we can do is, in this script here, I guess, we can say this says trial.end. We can write another script here that says end public void end if last trial. And we again take this trial as the parameter. Oops. So here, this trial, what we're going to do is check, is this trial equal to the last trial? So is this trial the last trial? If trial equals, so we can use this trick here to get access to the session, session.instance dot last trial. If the trial equals the last trial, then we say session.instance.end. So we're going to end the session. Okay. So of course on session end here we could display you know, like a message saying, you know, that's the end of the experiment or something, but right now we're just going to end the session. But it would be really easy. All we need to do, in fact, let's do that. It's probably quite easy. So what we want to do is let's go in our user interface here and let's add like another text box. Let's say, you know, call it goodbye, and we'll make it a little bit wider, and we'll type in that is the end of the experiment. Let's make it smaller here. Make it wrap. Thank you. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Let's add, you know, background. And let's make this part of that. Okay, so now we can just enable or disable this to present the feedback. So we'll leave it disabled, but we'll go here, and when the session ends, we can actually drag this over, and we can make it access the game object and say set active, and then the tick box means set active, and send the parameter of true, which means, of course, you know, enable the game object. So we'll go in here. Let's test this out here. Ah, we never assigned this, right? On trial end, you see what we need to do is end if last trial. We need to assign that there. Let's set this to 2 trials. So you see here, I'm just changing it to 2 trials just to make it quicker. There we go. And at this point, it's going to have written all of the data. So you see here, I guess the output's going to be slightly different because of the file handler configuration. It's going to be actually, sorry, it's in this folder instead of in here. Yeah, see it's doubled up, but what I should have done is this should not be like that. Like that. But anyway. So let's see this one. And here's our data for that experiment.